All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into a really mind-bending theory. The idea that human history wasn't something that just happened, but something that was, well, engineered.
And it all kicks off with this really unsettling question. What if everything you think you know about history is a lie? What if the past wasn't this chaotic, random series of events, but was actually, meticulously built, directed, even staged by some kind of unseen hand?
Well, this theory actually gives that unseen hand a name, the Watch. And we're not just talking about some secret society, no. This is supposedly a network that's been operating for millennia, pulling the strings of civilization from the shadows.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this massive idea, we're going to break it down. We'll start with this concept of a fabricated reality, then look at its supposed ancient origins, how it went global, the hidden codes in our myths, the genetic breadcrumbs they might have left behind, and then the big one, the grand hidden design behind it all.
All right, let's dive into Section 1. The central claim here is, well, it's absolutely explosive. The theory says that some of the most important figures in history, and even entire eras, weren't real. They were just constructs, like characters in a much, much larger scripted story. Okay, check this out. This is where it gets really wild. The theory puts forward this incredibly audacious claim that three giants of the 15th century, we're talking Leon Battista Alberti, the Renaissance genius, Nezahualcoyotl, the founder of the Aztec civilization, and Pachacuti, the architect of the Inca Empire, were actually the same person. Yeah, one single master operative codenamed G, supposedly shaping three different continents all at the same time. I mean, wow. So a network like that, where would it even begin, right? Well, according to this theory, you have to go back thousands of years. It all started with a group that didn't conquer, but infiltrated one of the world's first great powers, ancient Egypt.
This group, known as the Hyksos, supposedly had a totally different playbook. It was all about infiltration, not invasion. So, step 1, they introduce game-changing tech, like the war chariot. Step 2, they seize control of knowledge itself through mathematics. And then, for the finishing touch, they supposedly repurpose the brand new alphabet into the world's very first cryptographic tool. It's control through information, not just force.
So, after their time in Egypt, the theory says these agents scattered. But what was their next big move? Well, it was to set up a global hub for their operations, and they chose the perfect place to do it, the Kushan Empire.
And if you look at a map, the Kushans were in the perfect spot, smack dab in the middle of the ancient world. They became this central nexus connecting Rome, China, and Persia. And they weren't just controlling the flow of silks and spices, they were controlling the flow of languages, religions, and new ideas. They were, basically, the central switchboard for the entire Eurasian continent.
Okay, so now they've got this global network in place. According to the theory, this is when the Watch started its most ambitious project yet. The goal? To embed a single hidden story, what the source calls an omnimyth, into the bedrock foundational stories of every major culture.
So what does that look like? Well, take the creation from Earth idea. In Genesis, for example, we hear that humanity was formed from the dust of the ground.
Okay, now jump over to Greek mythology. What happens there? Prometheus molds mankind from water and dirt. You starting to see the pattern here?
And then go half a world away to Chinese mythology. The goddess Nua sculpts people from yellow earth. The theory's point is that this can't just be a coincidence. It's like finding the signature of a single author in books written in different languages on different continents.
And once you start looking, these patterns are supposedly everywhere. You see the same character types, like the dying god or the divine twins, popping up in completely separate cultures. You see shared symbols, like the trident being wielded by both Poseidon in Greece and Shiva in India. Even the languages link up. The name for the main sky god is almost identical in Greek, Sanskrit, and Latin. The theory presents all of these as the fingerprints of the Watch.
So, we've talked about myths and stories, but the next layer of this theory gets way more tangible. It claims the clues aren't just in our stories, they're buried in our very DNA and hidden within our most sacred texts. Okay, before we get into the genetics, we need a little bit of context about the diversity within Jewish populations. You have the Ashkenazi, who are the majority, then the Sephardi and Mizrahi communities, and also a really small group called the Karaites.
Now, the key to this whole genetic argument is something called a haplogroup. The easiest way to think about it is like a major branch on the human family tree. It's a bloodline that you can trace way, way back for thousands of years through specific markers in your DNA.
And here's where it gets interesting. The theory points out that these different groups have really different genetic origins. For example, the traditional priestly class, the Kohanim, they have one ancestral bloodline. But some Levite groups, they have a completely different one, traced back to Eurasia. The theory says this isn't just random genetic drift. It's evidence of a history that's been deliberately manipulated, layered, and pieced together.
And here's the kicker. That Eurasian bloodline, the R1a haplogroup, is ancient. It predates the traditional timeline for Abraham by thousands and thousands of years. So what does that suggest? It suggests a totally different origin story for some of these groups than the one we all know from the standard narrative.
And it's not just our genes. The theory says our texts were manipulated too. The foundational scriptures, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Gospels, weren't just divinely inspired. They were actively composed, edited, maybe even forged, to support this grand, fabricated story. So, all of this, it just leads to one huge critical question. Why? If any of this is true, what's the point? What could possibly be the ultimate goal of a conspiracy this massive, spanning millennia?
Well, the theory proposes a pretty chilling endgame to guide all of humanity towards a single, centrally scripted consciousness. And one of their main tools is something called narrative recapture. It's a propaganda technique where you don't crush your enemy, you absorb them. The classic example is the Roman Empire. They went from brutally persecuting Christians to suddenly adopting Christianity as the state religion. By doing that, they co-opted the entire movement and used its power for their own ends. They neutralized the threat by becoming it.
Look, we've really only just scratched the surface of what is an incredibly complex and dense theory. If any of this has piqued your interests and you want to go down the rabbit hole yourself, you can do a deep dive. The full source material is available on the author's website.
And that just leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to chew on. If human history has really been a meticulously crafted script this whole time, where are we in the story right now? And maybe, just maybe, have we finally gone off book?